Hey everybody, how you doing? I'm your host Noah Sullivan, aka Scruffy, and this is Worst to Best, a show where I pick a popular or unpopular movie series and watch every part in the franchise, then come back and give you my honest opinion, ranking them from worst to best. With Halloween right around the corner, everyone is preparing for the spooky holiday. Whether that's trick-or-treating, going to haunted houses, or just staying at home and watching a scary movie. And what better scary movie to start off with other than a classic? But not just any classic, Friday the 13th. Making its debut in 1979, it became one of the most popular and well-beloved horror franchises of all time, along with other icons such as Freddy Krueger from Nightmare on Elm Street and Michael Myers from Halloween. So today I'm going to be sitting down and ranking every single Friday the 13th movie from worst to best. And in order to make sure that my rankings are 100% accurate and I am 100% confident in my rankings, I sat down a few days ago and watched every single Friday the 13th movie back to back. And I mean every single one. I haven't slept in 3 days. Anyways, without any further ado, let's get on with the show. Number 11, and in my opinion, the absolute worst Friday the 13th film, Part 5's A New Beginning. What wasn't wrong with this film? I mean, for starters, Jason wasn't even in the movie, which wouldn't have been as big of a deal if his replacement Roy wasn't just so plain terrible. I mean, you would think that his motive would be to get revenge on the man who murdered his son, right? Wrong. Instead, what you get is him just going around and killing random people. In fact, it doesn't even seem like he's really trying to go after the person who murdered his son. It just seemed pointless and stupid. And on top of that, the kills were just awful. Almost all of the kills in the movie were either awkward close-ups or they would just cut away right before the good part. But I can't say that it was all bad because there were actually some enjoyable characters in that movie. Like, for instance, Tommy Jarvis, who came back just a little bit older and a little bit more mentally disturbed. And others like Demon and his girlfriend.
Hey, baby.
And I think I'm one of the few that can say that I actually like the way that they were taking this story. I wanted Tommy Jarvis to become the new Jason Voorhees. However, it was just a mess, and it didn't really seem like it was going in that direction at all. And as much as I would have loved to have seen that, with all of the hate and the poor box office ratings, they just decided to scrap the idea altogether. Which is just disappointing, but I do understand the reasoning for it. But hey, who knows? Maybe we'll get a reboot in the future. I mean, Halloween did it twice. Number 10, Jason X. There's really not a lot of good things that I can say about this movie either. To be honest, it didn't even really feel like a slasher movie. It felt more like a sci-fi comedy. And there were certain parts where instead of me feeling like I was watching a Friday the 13th movie, it felt more like I was watching a reality episode of Futurama.
Good news, everyone!
I mean, the comedy was overdone, and the whole story itself was just plain idiotic. I get the idea of wanting to do something different and try a different concept, but space in the future, really just not a good choice. However, I will say that it has probably one of the coolest and only liquid nitrogen kill that you will ever see. And, in my opinion, the most badass character in the whole franchise, Sergeant Briggs. I mean, this guy launched himself into a mecha Jason just to save his friends. In space, by the way. Not only that, but he carried him into Earth 2's atmosphere and crashed into the lake like a shooting star. I mean, this guy makes Master Chief look like a wimp. Sorry, Chief. Number 9, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. This movie is probably one of the earliest forms of clickbait that I have ever seen. They should have called it Jason Takes a Boat for an hour just to get to Manhattan. Although I can see why they decided to go for the shorter title instead. But really, the movie was just plain misleading. And not only that, but the story was just weird. I mean, the main character was seeing hallucinations of little boy Jason, and it's never really explained why either. And for whatever reason, he has hair. Yeah, I don't know either. And not only that, but But have you seen this Jason? At least without his mask on, he looks absolutely ridiculous. He looks like if all those boogers you've been flicking behind the couch all of a sudden just manifested and became a serial killer. I mean, not that I would know or anything. And on top of that, even his kill just makes no sense. First off, he gets drowned, which if you've already watched Friday the 13th, you know that Jason doesn't drown. I mean, the guy's undead, so he can't drown. And secondly, he turns into a child. What? But you know, I have to give credit where credit is due. I actually enjoyed the rooftop fight scene with Jason and Julius, and that was probably the most entertaining thing in the whole movie. And not only that, but I have to respect them for trying to do something different and taking Jason out of Camp Crystal Lake after 8 movies. I mean, come on, he couldn't stay there forever. Number 8, Part 9, Jason Goes to Hell. And it actually wasn't that bad, surprisingly. The gore was some of the best in the franchise, in my opinion, and the acting was pretty decent. Now, I don't want you to get confused and think that I'm praising this movie because it was still pretty bad. I mean, this is another one of those movies where Jason really isn't in it at all. Well, scratch that, he gets blown to bits within the first few minutes of the movie, and then near the end gets resurrected just to get stabbed in the heart and then dragged down by a bunch of gravelers. Yeah, it's pretty weird. And I guess Jason really is in the movie, but not the Jason that we're used to seeing. It just kind of feels like we're watching a bunch of average guys going around and just killing people, you know? And on top of that, the story is just way out there. I mean, all of a sudden now, Jason is a weird demonic worm body switcher thing, and the only way that he can resurrect himself is through a Voorhees, and the only way that he can be killed is through a Voorhees, but it has to be done by this weird sacrificial dagger. Yeah. And not to mention that he was putting his tongue in people in places that just don't belong. Number 7, Part 2. It was just bland. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. It was just okay. I mean, it was basically a copy of the first movie. A copy cast and a copy story, with the only differences being a different killer and an upgrade to the gore. Not to say that it was just plain awful and there was nothing to it. It introduced Jason for the first time we'd ever seen, and he wasn't wearing the hockey mask, he was wearing the sack, but in my opinion, that was probably one of the cooler looking Jasons out of the whole franchise. The only problem with that is that he was kind of pathetic. He didn't feel like the hulking, unstoppable brute that we knew and loved. Instead, he just felt like some average guy with a pickaxe. I mean, he was just getting his butt handed to him so many times throughout the movie. It felt less like a murder and more like a tussle that happens after you argue about which is better, Star Wars or Star Trek. Star Wars, by the way. Number 6, Friday the 13th, the original. Now, I know most of you are probably already screaming at your screens and furiously typing on your keyboard, sending all the hate my way. But just listen. This movie came out in 1979, and I'm sure back when it first came out, it was probably one of the most terrifying movies of all time. I mean, it paved the way for a whole franchise and a whole new genre of slasher films. However, it just didn't really age all that well. And even though the POV cam for kills was really cool, and not knowing who the murderer was until the very end, and then finding out it was some sweet old lady, just made it all the more terrifying. But even so, the movie was just not that great. It was slow, and there was practically no budget for the film whatsoever. Not that low budget is bad, you can always make a good movie with a low budget, but this one, not so much. And even the ending fight scene with Pamela Voorhees and Alice was just cringy. But don't you worry, it will always have a special place in all of our hearts, and that's what matters. Number 5, Part 3. This movie was pretty good, minus all of the 3D overload, but other than that, it was pretty good. A lot of the kills were amazing, like that one guy getting chopped in half with Jason's machete and the other girl getting shot in the eye with a harpoon. And not only that, but this is the first movie that we actually get to see Jason don the hockey mask, his iconic look. I will say that the 3D did bother me though, because even though I had switched it over to 2D, you could definitely still tell where they were trying to implement 3D in the movie. And trust me, you would know because it would linger and linger and linger. Like a long freaking time. And I cannot forget that this movie had probably one of the worst acting scenes I have ever seen in my entire life. Oh my god is right. And the movie went as far as to even copy the ending of the first movie, which didn't bother me as much as I thought it would, but it was still kind of a cheap way to be like, hey, do you remember the first film? Although I will never forget the scene where I almost peed my pants as Jason without his mask started hauling ass down to the lake. Number 4, Part 7's The New Blood. This movie was kind of in the middle for me. I wanted to hate it and I wanted to like it all at the same time, but it's understandable why most people didn't like this movie. I mean, your main character is a psychic. And the main character's name in the movie is Tina, which she should probably be the only character in the movie because other than her mother and the doctor, everybody else in the movie is just plain forgettable and unimportant. I'm pretty sure some of them didn't even have names. And most, if not all, of the kills in this movie were censored, which didn't bother me as much as I thought it would because I could pretty much put 2 and 2 together. He hit or stabbed this person with this, and this person died. And then I just fill in the middle and everything works out fine. And even though there was just a lot wrong with this movie, I couldn't help but like it. For instance, the Jason, in my opinion, was the coolest looking Jason of all time. And after his mask was broken in half, the reveal of what he looked like underneath was absolutely grotesque, and I loved it. And even if you don't like the movie, you have to admit, that fight between the main character and Jason Voorhees was just plain badass. However, I still can't excuse Zombie Dad. I just can't. Number 3, Part 4, The Final Chapter. I actually really liked this movie. It seemed where the 3 previous movies had failed, this movie had succeeded. The area just felt more expanded, the characters felt more likable, and this Jason was a monster. I mean, the dude exploded through a door for God's sake. Not only that, but it's the first movie where we get to see Tommy Jarvis, probably one of the most well-loved characters in the franchise other than Jason Voorhees himself. However, I will say the story was a little murky. It just kind of seemed like they were just saying, oh, Jason's alive, time to kill again, and the people just happen to be there. Which isn't a big deal, that's typically how these slasher films go. But in terms of the characters, the only ones that I could really feel for was the Jarvis family. All of the others were just kind of there to be killed off. Which really wasn't a big deal either because it got us some decent kills in there as well. And it had the coolest Jason death with Tommy Jarvis swinging into his head and then him sliding down. It was just, oh, it was so good. Number 2, Friday the 13th, the remake. Oh, now I know you guys are just in absolute uproar. You've grabbed your pitchforks and your torches and you're headed over here right now to lynch me. But just let me explain. This movie came out in 2009 and the last Friday the 13th movie that we saw was this. Yeah. Not only that, but it just breathed new life into the franchise and gave Jason Voorhees a whole new reason to be afraid of him. This was not like the Jason Voorhees that we knew. This wasn't the slow, walking towards you, super calm, and you would just continuously trip until he finally reached you and then he would just kill you. No, this Jason hauled ass. And I mean, he sprinted. This movie legitimately scared me. And not only that, but he was tactical. He plays bear traps, and he even used one of the characters in the movie as bait to try and lure the rest of the characters out to go and kill them as well. And it even had a few references from older Friday the 13th movies like Part 2. He was wearing the sack for about half the movie before he finally donned the iconic hockey mask that we all know and love. And if you pay attention in one of the tunnel scenes, you'll see a wheelchair, which I'm pretty sure is a reference to this kill from Part 2. And on top of that one, you can see one of the characters swinging at Jason with a pickaxe. Whether there's more references to older Friday the 13th films in this movie, I'm not sure, but if you see any, be sure to comment down below what you find. And man, did they amp up the gore. I'm talking a screwdriver through the neck, being roasted alive, being sawed in half by a machete then thrown on the back of the truck. This Jason was brutal. The only real issue that I had with this movie was the nudity. I know that Friday the 13th is known for its skinny dipping and topless girls, and that's all good and fine, but this movie just overdid it, just a little too much. And finally, at number 1, and in my opinion, the best Friday the 13th movie, Part 6, Jason Lives. I mean, what's not to love about this movie? First off, you get Tommy Jarvis back, and this time he's a little less mentally disturbed, and instead of being psychotic, he's more heroic. Granted, he is responsible for bringing Jason back to life, and that's on him. But majority of the kills in this movie were awesome, except for maybe a couple that were just a little too silly. But other than that, I can't find anything wrong with this movie. They had some amazing actors, an awesome story, and they actually had kids in the camp. Jeez, it took them 6 movies to do that. And not only that, but with Jason being undead, he is practically unstoppable. He's bulletproof, he is strong, and it seems like nothing can kill him, except for Tommy Jarvis. And not only that, but this particular movie did the one thing that none of the others did for me, and that was make me feel for a character. For majority of the movie, you think of the sheriff as some obstacle and kind of an annoyance, but as the movie goes on, you start to appreciate him more and understand that he's just trying to protect his daughter and protect the town that he lives in. And then right at the end, he sacrifices himself to save his daughter, because love conquers all. It was beautiful, man. Alright, that's going to be it for today. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button down below and comment which Friday the 13th movie was your favorite. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Peace.
Wow, yeah, swear to God I'm with it. I don't see nobody in my lane that's quite go get it like me. Wow, please don't be wasting my time with that business. Who you kidding, man? Yeah. Wow, yeah, swear to God I'm with it.